Hello, and welcome to the Scotland Rugby News podcast with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison from Happiness Egg Shaped, and the boss man, Big Gavlar Harper, who is back. You've heard of Gavin and Stacey, now it's Gavin and H. How are you, big man?
Yeah, not too bad. Gavin and H will never catch on.
I'm telling you, it's happening. It's happening, Gavlar. It's happening. I'm excited for Gavin and Stacey. I want to find out what happened on that fishing trip, Uncle Bryn.
Yeah, I think, don't we all? It's the big unanswered question, isn't it?
Tell you what, it's a bit like, why did I never play for Scotland? Just nobody
I can
seems
tell you an
to
answer
know.
to that, but it's not broadcastable.
Just you be kind. Good to see you, big chap. You've been away having canapes in Glasgow today, I believe.
I was busy working, but there was a time for a canopy or two and a glass of juice after at the civic reception for the Glasgow Warriors. So yeah, no, it was a good afternoon. It was much deserved recognition, but I think when you see things like that, it does make you realise how difficult it is, particularly in that city, to cut through all the football noise and try and get rugby a bit more attention. But yeah, look, hopefully what they've done will attract a few more bums on seats at Scotstoun this season.
It'd be interesting. I'm not convinced, but I get what you mean. It must be a challenge in Glasgow, because did Celtic get a civic reception every time they win something? If they did, they would be there all the time.
At the danger of winding Rangers fans up, Celtic might lay claim to the building after a while. But
it's the kind of thing you wonder if Glasgow could market like we're a team for the whole city. Do you know there's no colours, if you see what I mean? Like we're the team to unite a city.
The whole city, but also it's more than that, isn't it? It's that whole Glasgow Cali region, the old traditional region that, like, and all the clubs. And actually, speaking to a few people today at the civic reception, you don't actually need to target the same audience at all. That's fine if there's all these football fans, but if you can tap into more of that family audience and make it a completely different experience, as you say, that team to almost unite a city that's clearly divided by its football teams, then why not? That's got to be a good thing, and that's got to be. Look, I've said it before, but I think 2015 felt like the culmination on the pitch of that Glasgow team's achievements. It doesn't feel like that for this team, so the club now also need to drive them forward, whether that's doing more work at Scotstoun or getting more season tickets sold, or which I think they're making decent strides with, or getting just more punters through the door and getting more eyes on the Glasgow Warriors. I think that has to be part of the mission now, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens at the club over the next couple of years, because they've got to, ultimately they've got to keep winning on the pitch, but yeah, it feels like they're in a good place off the pitch.
It's like Leicester winning the Premier League, I think. Like, it was totally unexpected. It wasn't planned. Like, every team starts the season, let's go and win it. Let's go and finish top four and then see what happens. There's no way that was planned like Leicester. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they follow it up this season, because now the teams go to Scotstoun fully loaded to try and beat Glasgow, or do they kind of concede, right? Actually, we can, we'll go for it at home, or we've got Glasgow next week, but then we've got a really winnable one the week after. So it's a tough league. The URC is really tough.
Yeah, we were just saying that before we came on here. I think for me, the URC is probably the toughest league out with the French top 14. I think the addition of South African teams particularly has brought something extra to the whole league. I think the Italian teams have particularly Benetton, but as we saw at the weekend, Zebre as well, have got better. I think, yeah, the Welsh teams have got their own problems, but now look, there's definitely a lot of competition there, and yeah, I think you're right. I think even without Glasgow being champions, you look at their home record from last season, and the only team they lost to were Northampton in Europe. So there is a bit of a juggling act for coaches there to say, well, actually, the chances of us getting someone going to Scotstoun are slim to none. So it'd be interesting to see how teams play it. I think some of the bigger teams, and particularly in Europe, you would expect teams to come fully loaded. But yeah, it might be one that other clubs choose to take a bit of a hit on.
Yeah, I get what you mean about Zebre. I mean, Benetton's squad now, and it looks like there seems to be money in Italian rugby. Like the budget for the teams seems to be allowing them to almost have Benetton's squad. There's like I think maybe 17, 18 internationals who will be away with Italy. But then they've got this almost like another squad that doesn't qualify for Italy. That's really like good quality guys who will keep the kettle boiling when Italian internationals need a bit of or are being managed. Like that's strong. And then Zebre, the impressive thing for me about a pre-season friendly, if you can keep a team to nil, like there's always going to be tries in pre-season, but to keep Glasgow to nil, and Glasgow, you'll potentially have a stat. When was the last time Glasgow didn't score a point?
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think because it's not a competitive game, our man Kevin Miller probably does have a stat somewhere that he'll be able to tell me. But yeah, I mean it's a long time since Glasgow haven't scored a point. Never mind scoring a try. Obviously there was it was a B team, a C team. I've seen all those comments and stuff, but you still expect, I think, a level of performance and as you say, you kind of concede in pre-season that both teams are going to score tries. So, yeah, it's an interesting. I wouldn't read too much into that result. I certainly don't think anybody.
I don't think you can, but it feels like a long way to go for what happened. But that's kind of how it goes when you're sort of seeking pre-season games. Kevin Miller, like he's the Scotland Rugby News Rachel Riley, isn't he? I mean, the numbers he can
incredible.
And you read his stuff and you get totally lost in it. It's like, oh yeah, and we did. Like, I love that. It's so far removed from me, but it's an enjoyable thing to get involved in.
It's amazing. It's like it's something that basically, I think one of the things that I am really proud of Scotland Rugby News doing is that level of sort of analysis and really diving into the sort of detail of a game, of a player. We did, when Duhan broke the try record, Kevin had a piece all ready to go about who Duhan had scored against, what minutes he scores most in, all that really fine detail, which, I don't think, particularly from a Scottish point of view, I just don't think you get that anywhere else, which is
does Kevin go out much?
You'd have to ask him that, but he certainly seems to be in for when all the games of rugby are on. That being said, yeah, I mean, I watched Glasgow against Zebre on a YouTube stream that was hard to find last weekend, so I could hardly talk. But yeah, I think Kevin's stuff's great, and yeah, I mean, like he must have, his name came up in conversations more than once at the City Chambers today, in relation to the work he does. So yeah, obviously catching the right people's eyes, and yeah, it's great to have him as part of our team. I suppose that would be my plug for folk to pay their £12 for the subscription for the year.
It's worth it. It's worth it. And at some point, I'm going to meet a deadline and give you an article. Not that folk read it, but
the chance of you hitting a deadline would be.
It's like kicking conversions.
So back to that reason you never played for Scotland.
One of. The Glasgow one's interesting. I mean, the other end of the M8, Edinburgh looking at that. I always feel the other team is your second team. Like, you want the Scotland teams to do well. So the next result you look for is the other team. But there will also be a bit of green-eyed monster where Edinburgh are looking at that going, I really fancy a slice of that. Like, that would be magic to be involved with that.
Totally. Like, it would be hard for that not to be the case. I think Grant Gilchrist, I spoke to Grant a couple of weeks ago. There's a piece on the site now about how they'll use the sort of their disappointment from the end of last season to kind of spur them on. But yeah, you have to look at all the things Glasgow have had, whether it was, obviously the celebrations in Pretoria would be amazing. But the homecoming at the airport at Scotstoun, and then things like today, what are we, 2.5 months later? And this is going to go on. The trophies going around all the clubs in the Glasgow region, and
it's even, I think it's at Megaland. It's even coming to Boroughmuir.
Well, I'm not sure how well that'll sit with some of the Edinburgh players. But yeah,
I'm sure did you see? I'm sure it's coming to Boroughmuir.
I haven't seen that. I think they might have made that up. But
I'm telling you, I'm going to search that while you're talking.
Like the Edinburgh players are bound to look at that and think, I wish that was. And somebody like Grant is a prime example. How long has he been at Edinburgh and he's one of very few now who's had to sit through Glasgow winning the league twice.
Yeah.
That must be pretty hard to stomach.
Yeah, it's I don't know. How long are we going to wait for another Scottish team to win it? To go back to back for Glasgow, you'd pretty much be retiring. Like, just give Franco the freedom to Glasgow and let him do whatever he wants. That's a big old ask, but Edinburgh, you would love to think they're the next cab off the rank.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard because I think there's a lot of negativity around Edinburgh, and finishing 9th or 10th, it just isn't good enough. But actually, they weren't a million miles away. I've said it loads of times before, but the lack of try scoring bonus points was what really scuppered them getting into the playoffs, and then they had a tough run in with Munster at home, Benetton away the last two games, and that is incredible.
Boroughmuir Trophy. Sorry, no. Yeah, it's just I don't know. When you see Edinburgh finish just outside, they won as many games as Stormers, I think.
Yeah, and Ulster, who finished 6th, I think.
But if you look at that top 8 who qualify for the playoffs, Edinburgh want to get in it. One of the South African teams missed out. Can't remember. So, but for those two to jump in, 2 of those top 8 have got to drop out.
And this is it.
It's an Edinburgh start to the season is really tough. Leinster and then away to South Africa for 2 weeks.
Yeah, and then when they come back, they've got the Stormers at the Hive.
Yeah.
It couldn't be almost any harder. And, you could be 2 or 3 games into the season and saying, oh, hang on a minute, we're starting to panic here.
Or the flip is if they get off to a flyer.
This is it.
And you can knock off points. If you can beat Leinster, go to South Africa, come back with, I don't know, 5-6 points, that'd be success. And then you come back feeling reasonably good to play against the Stormers, and all of a sudden you're into week 4 and you're sitting 5th or 6th.
And this is it. I think the first couple of weeks of Edinburgh's season really sets the tone of where they'll be, what they'll be competing for. As you say, if you come back with, say you've got 10 points in the first 3 games, all of a sudden it's huge, and you're saying, well, okay, maybe we're 5th or 6th now, but we've got 3 of our most difficult games of the season out the way. Can we push for the top 4? Rather than just saying, I'm happy with top 8, can you make top 4? Can you, but whereas Glasgow have got a slightly easier start.
I think when you look at the playoffs, there's the top 8, which is kind of where you need to be, but you want to be top 4 because having a home game, although Glasgow completely go against that, what I'm saying now, with the way they did it, but the home game, and even just the revenue you can generate from another game,
Well, can you imagine Scotstoun was, I think, sold out for the quarter-final. I think there was discussion at the time of the semi-final and the final
being at Murrayfield.
being at Murrayfield, which is the home.
That would have gone down like a turd sandwich.
Yes, it probably would have, and I can see both sides of why Scottish Rugby would want it there, but also why Glasgow fans would say, "Nah, no thanks."
You would love to think, though, that Edinburgh fans would have gone.
And I think that's it. And I think that's probably something that's unique to the Scottish pro teams because, we talked to Bernard last week and I'm not convinced a Leinster fan.
He kind of talked to us.
Probably more accurate. I'm not convinced. It was great to have Bernard on, but I'm not convinced that a Leinster fan. In fact, I know a Leinster fan's not going to watch Munster.
Nah,
just never in a million years, and vice versa. And I think that's one of those kind of unique anomalies with the Scottish pro teams that you will get an Edinburgh fan or a Glasgow fan go and watch the other. So, yeah, that top four is so important that because traditionally and typically home advantage does play a reasonably big part in playoffs. So
unless you're Glasgow and you completely go against all of that,
and you go to the defending champions and knock them out, and then go to the Bulls and you're like 13 points down and win there, which is just ridiculous. But
they didn't do it the easy way. We've got a fair bit.
The Scottish athletes ever do things the easy way?
No.
We've watched Andy Murray for how many years?
I know. What a boy. Nathan McQueen, no. Pigbearian. Got his gold medal. Delighted for Lightning McQueen class. Sammy Kinghorn. A couple of silvers more to come. Did I tell you I'm marrying Sammy Kinghorn?
No, that is news to me and hopefully not news to your wife.
I'm marrying Sammy Kinghorn. I'm marrying her to her fiance.
Brilliant.
It's me that gets to do the ceremony, which I'm very excited about.
That's brilliant.
I'm hoping it's in Hello Magazine. Because let's face it.
Face for radio. Says me, eh?
Harsh. But listen, big chat. We've got a few nights out at the Hive coming up, starting on Friday night. Delighted. Scotland teams named for Wales, and there's names missing, but they probably don't give us that big sort of sucking in the air and what's happened that they used to, because the depth of the squad has massively improved. And you look at that backline, there's no Rona Lloyd, no Lisa Thompson, but on the wings, Fran McGee, Karine Grant, and at 12, Meryl Smith. So, while those two are big players, the players that are in are strong. It's an exciting backline.
Yeah, I think long gone are the days when a Scotland coach has to worry that one player or two players are missing, and how do we fill that? It was almost right. Well, we'll move. In days gone by, Helen Nelson would have moved from 10, and somebody like Sarah Law would have come in there, and you were always making 2 or 3 adjustments because one player was unavailable. Where we spoke to Meryl a couple of weeks ago, and she obviously wants to play 10 ultimately, and I think she'll get I would be surprised if she doesn't get an opportunity to play there against Fiji. I think that suits her game. But look, I think she brings something really different at 12. I think it'll be interesting to see. Wales are obviously pretty physical, so I'm interested to see how she kind of matches up, or if Matt Banahan, Brian Easton have a plan for, do they use the back row more carrying in that middle channel, because Meryl's probably not got that power game that Lisa has. I think when you look at the back three, you could make an argument now that Rona actually has to get in ahead of one of these two. She needs to show, if she gets a chance next week, that that she deserves a spot ahead of these two, because Corinne Grant was superb in the Six Nations game in Cardiff, and Fran
Her
McGee
try was class, although
amazing.
defending was poor, but she still had to score it.
Yeah, it's a great finish, and Fran McGee's shown plenty of what she can do. So
I think her and Emma Orr are like Meryl's class. Meryl's consistently class. Emma Orr and Fran McGee have those moments that get you off your seat. Like they can bust the line and go. And Karina, but in the way that Rona does, like Rona would get the ball, the head would go back, the knee lift goes, and she takes off. Corinne Grant is so agile, so quick on her feet to beat a defender. Fran McGee loves to score. Emma can run over the top, run round that kind of outside break that she's got at 13 that's just absolutely ideal. And then Chloe, who's just lightning and just loves to carry the ball, just loves to be involved. So it's really exciting. If Mary McDonald gets decent ball, I'm keen to see her get a crack. She's just relentless in the way she goes about things. She's tiny wee, but the heart of a lion. Like, she's scrappy do. She thinks she's 6'4" and 17 stone, but a class rugby player.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. I think for the kind of evolution of this Scotland team is actually now how they get the ball to Emma Orr, Fran McGee, Chloe Rowley, and let them play. Because I think at times in the Six Nations they felt a wee bit stagnant, a wee bit stuck, and there were times you just wanted them to kind of release that handbrake. So yeah, it's a big job for the halfbacks. But interested to see how they go and look up front. Up front, we talked about the back division being missing a couple of names. There's obviously a couple missing in the forwards, but again, there should be no cause to panic there, because the players who've come in are more than capable of doing a job.
And Burney's gone 6-2, split on the bench. I reckon the place is going to go nuts when Jade gets a run. When she comes off the bench and comes on, I reckon that'll be a roar.
And look, rightly so, because she's been such a big part of the team for so long. And I think that having Jade, Louise McMillan was cut from the squad when Brian Easton picked that 30 to go WXV. Now she's back in for these two games, and she's got a chance. She'll have a point to prove. You bring on Louise McMillan, Eva Donaldson, Jade Conkle, 20-25 minutes to go, plus Anne Young, Eliane Clark, Ellis Martin, to give your pack a lift.
I'm interested to see when Jade comes on, and I love that Jade has got to that point where you don't need to use her whole name; you just say her first name. It's like Greg Laidlaw. Is Greg playing? What's Greg doing? Is Greg's cat Jade? It's just Jade. Rona's the same.
Yeah, and you're right. And
Jade coming on. Get her on at halftime. Give her 40 minutes. We know Evie Gallagher's class, and go for it. We know Rachel Malcolm's class. Alex Stewart probably needs more game time just to keep gathering that experience. But
yeah,
Evie Gallagher, Rachel Malcolm, in some ways, not necessarily protecting, because that's not really what I mean, but what are we going to learn about them? But give Jade 40 minutes to go, right, I've got probably half a dozen games to put into 40 minutes here because I've been watching for so long. Like, unleash the beast and let her go.
Yeah, totally. And I'm actually, I suppose, to that point, I would be interested to see, with a view to games further down the line, where Brian wants to pick, where Jade comes on or who she comes on for. I'd no doubt she'll come on at number 8, but she could, in theory, come on and they take Alex Stewart off and move Evie Gallagher to 7, because you want your, probably your two best ball carriers in the team. They might take Rachel Malcolm off.
Rachel McLaughlin's not there.
Like,
who's class. Like, we're talking in the back line, we're talking about depth. In that forward pack, Emma Wassell's not there. not in the 23. Rachel McLaughlin's not in the 23, who have been, starters, big players for the squad for quite a long time.
Yeah, and I think that speaks about the depth that the squad has, that's been built in the squad over the last couple of years and beyond. You're looking at 3 or 4 players there who ordinarily would be in your first choice 15, who aren't in this 23, but you're not thinking, well, that's a major cause for concern at this stage. I think probably just to speak about that a wee bit, I think Rona and Lisa Thompson have both been left out because obviously Lisa was at the Olympics. I think Rona had time off while the Olympics was kind of ongoing, so they were both late into camp. Brian Easton had said last week that they would get another week's training and probably come into contention to play against Fiji. Emma Wassell is out. There's a medical reasons, was kind of the reason highlighted by Scottish Rugby without them giving us any further details. So hopefully all is well there. And yeah, I mean, to have a squad at this stage where you don't have any injuries either is obviously important. So yeah, long may that continue. But no, it'll be an interesting one on Friday because Wales are, games against Wales are traditionally really close. So I think,
and on that point, we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. I think it's important we win these 2 games. I know they're build up for WXV and there's no trophy and yada yada yada, but I think it's really important to win these games and Scotland women to have that hunger and desire to win. But I'd also like to see Ellis, Anne, and Ellie get on. I think they need game time at that level and at that intensity, and against a Welsh team that quite likes the set piece and is quite physical. But they need. I think those 3 need to play. I think Eva needs to get on for the same reason. I think Eva needs that kind of battle hardened bit. I think that's class. If she can get on, the other bit to Jade we want on because we need to get game time. And then I don't really know a huge amount about Leah Brebner-Holden and Lucia Scott, but the only 2 backs on the bench, you're thinking they're going to get a run.
Yeah, you would imagine so. Although the sort of warning sign there would be, I think Kieran Bell and Nicole Flynn were both on the bench during the Six Nations and are at present uncapped. So it's not unheard of that Brian sticks with the team that's. So again, if it's close, he might decide to not to change them. But I would be surprised, given that this is essentially a warm-up game, and all the noise coming out the camp has been that this is about building for World Cup and WXV and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think probably expect both of them to get on. I think Leah Bremner-Holden particularly looked sharp for Edinburgh during the Celtic Challenge, and then was good for she was like one of the overage players who went with the 20s for their Six Nations in Italy, and she looked sharp at that. She looks like she's got a decent service. Her kicking game was pretty good. So yeah, I'd be surprised particularly not to see her. Lucia Scott, I think primarily as a fullback, although she played 13 for the 20s because they had players missing. So again, that gives direct competition for Chloe Rowley. We talked about Merrill being able to play 15, so there's competition there. I would be most interested, I think, in if there was a early doors, if Scotland picked up a knock in the midfield. I'm not sure what the move would be if she would just slot straight in. It feels like a big ask for somebody, 13, talked about loads of times being probably one of the key positions on the pitch from a defensive point of view. Whether Chloe would step up or what the plan is there. So it'll be an interesting one. But yeah, I mean, Lucia Scott might get 20 minutes at 15. And yeah, there's a clip of her doing the rounds on Scottish Rugby's social media channels, throwing a what you'll know best, Bruce, as a Toonie flip. And yeah, she looks like she's got a fair pack of skills. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see them both go.
No, it's the Welsh team has been named, and I can't pretend that I've got a huge amount of knowledge, but it looks like they've got a few names in there we do know, but it looks like they're trying a couple. Kira Bevan at 9 and skipper, she's class, kicks very well. Tuipulotu at tight head, so that means there's going to be a fair old tussle. Having Jazz Joyce play, back for the sevens. So Tomo and Rona get a bit of a rest, but Jazz Joyce, now you're straight back in. That'll be interesting against Corrine. Against Fran McGee. That'll be a decent battle. I like that idea. I'm not really sure what Wales have got on the bench. They've not gone with 6-2. So Scotland are maybe thinking it's going to be a tough old shift up front, or maybe it's just Brian wanting to give people games. But that Welsh squad it's going to be a decent battle.
Yeah, I mean, it should be a good game. It should be. Those are two Six Nations quality teams. I think it's hopefully we get weather like tonight. Certainly here, it's blue skies. So yeah, I mean, it's set up to be a really interesting game. I think, as you say, Wales have gone not far off first choice, which is you could probably say that the same position as Scotland, maybe missing a couple, but not far off. So yeah, it should be a good game.
Yeah, back row's decent. Butchers is a class player. It'll be a fair old battle between her and that Scottish back row. Crowd, have you heard any noises? I'm hoping it's going to be full. I think it's also important, back to what I said before about winning. There's winning for getting used to winning, but there's also winning for creating a story and getting people interested and getting bums on seats, especially when it's Fiji the week after, which might be maybe a tougher sell.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I haven't heard much in terms of crowds. I know there are tickets still available. So, yeah, I suppose if you're at a loose end on Friday night, come and join Bruce and I at the Hive. And because, I mean, it should be a good game. I think that is, you're right. Like, winning helps drive that momentum behind the team. I think also winning helps because Scotland are pretty well placed just now in the world rankings. I don't think they want to be dropping down too many places before there's a draw for a World Cup, because we've seen with the men's team that you can get stung there. So, and I think the world rankings post WXV will be the metric from which the World Cup is drawn, the pools are drawn. So yeah, and obviously Wales are there or thereabouts with Scotland. So yeah, they want to win for loads of reasons.
That's why you're the journalist. That's the insight that we get from Scotland Rugby News with Gavin Harper, because I just thought they needed to win, but you've got your eye on that big picture that everybody says we're supposed to look at and keep in mind. Class.
Next question.
You're not used to being complimented, are you? You're not used to getting complimented.
Doesn't happen very often, I can assure you.
Listen, I'm really looking forward to Friday night. Me and my wife and my youngest are going, which I'm delighted about because she loves to see it. Great role models. A win would just be magic. And then the following week, Edinburgh play Glasgow at the Hive on Friday night. And then on Saturday, Gloucester. What did I say?
You said Glasgow.
Did I? Edinburgh play Gloucester. I'm looking forward to that. I like Gloucester. They're one of those English teams I like. They've always they've always had a bit of Scottish connection. We've kind of had some decent representatives down in Gloucester, and I don't know if they'll bring many fans because it's a pre-season game. But when they came up this season, the atmosphere was outstanding.
Yeah, and I think you might be surprised because, like, they've been up, they've experienced it. It was a great night. It's a Friday night game, so there's a chance for them to have the weekend in Edinburgh. It's a good opportunity to go and see their team, some new signings, and I similarly hope that there's plenty of Edinburgh fans turn out, because they've only got one pre-season game, and it would be pretty easy to say, actually, we'll just wait until the league starts the following week. But if Edinburgh are, the noises coming out of Edinburgh is that they need to be absolutely flying for Leinster, which is right. So unlike Glasgow, who could probably have afforded an opportunity to young kids and a wee bit more of a development feel at their first pre-season game, Edinburgh have only got one, so they'll need to be probably right on it. And it should be, they've talked a bit about developing that attack and stuff. And Gloucester are always one of those teams that when you're watching Premiership rugby, you think, actually, stick Gloucester on, because they could score a few points, but they've also got a tendency to ship a few. So, it could be a bit of a try-fest. I've said that. It'll finish 6-3 now.
Aye. The Harper kiss of death. Matthew, the new coach, seems to be well received, bringing lots of energy. It'll be interesting. He's had some success in America, which I didn't mind that when you've had a different experience, and he'll definitely have knowledge of URC, but I quite like that freshness coming in.
Yeah, I think people have their pros and cons about another non-Scottish coach coming into the Scottish setup.
You
but
said
clearly somebody that Sean Everett knows well. They work together at the Sharks. He's got loads of experience of kind of Currie Cup level in South Africa. He's obviously then gone, as you say, to America and had some pretty reasonable success there. So it'll be interesting. That is obviously the one area that really badly let Edinburgh down last season. So they need to improve on their attack, and I think they probably needed a change in that department. It was a question of who they might bring in or how they might change that. So I think interesting to see what he brings.
Yeah, I'm interested to see who they pick, but that's maybe for next week. Club rugby got up and running. I think it's going to take a bit of time for it to settle down. There was people expecting the Super Series teams to all of a sudden dominate, and then Watsonians go down to Kelso, for what I can gather, unbelievable game, really high scoring. Kelso they've got some quality down there. Bruce McNeil still going. Like he's about 482 years old and he's still going. Nicky Walker's coaching, that squad that Kinnigan's helped assemble, beat Watsonians, blue sky, sunshine. Ayr seemed, a bit sticky, but so much quality in that Ayr squad.
And this is it. Look, the Super. Speaking to the former Super Series club teams at the launch a couple of weeks ago, look, they all know that there's a target on their backs, and that everybody wants to prove a point against them. There's a piece on the site. I spoke to Scott Steele, who has signed for Glasgow Hawks, and he's saying, well, completely the opposite. Hawks want to prove the point that they should have been in the Super Series when the franchises were given out, 5 years ago now. So, no, look, I think it'll take a bit of time, as you say, to get kind of ironed out who sits where, whether the Super Series teams are going to come in and dominate the league. If there was this huge gulf that people elsewhere talked about there being between Super Series and the club game, the first weekend of results didn't necessarily reflect that.
I think the fixture list can help that, because Currie are probably a bit like Hawks. Currie won the Premiership last year. Good club, recruit well coached, great analysis. Some quality rugby players in that Currie team. So them going away Ayr could have been a sore one. Great that it was on TV for folk that couldn't get there. you're watching though, and you're thinking, why are we not playing rugby at this time? Like, why are we playing rugby in December and January when you've got decent crowds, good rugby? It just looks so much better.
And the whole, we talked earlier about the women's game and trying to drive the momentum behind the product. When you've got Blue Skies 40 points to however many, it's so much easier to sell than please come down to your local club and watch a 9-6 in the pouring rain, and by the end of it, you won't be able to feel your fingers, but you'll have a great time, And ultimately, you will have a great time, and I'm not taking anything away from any of the clubs. You will. Like, rugby clubs have been given so much to you, to me, to everybody probably, but it's just so much more difficult to drive that scale of the product to a new audience.
In the men's leagues, there's the leagues a whole. Well, they're going to take time, but there's not a huge number of local games. Just the way the teams have fallen, an away trip properly is an away trip. There's not that many local derbies to, have an away support there and create a bit of atmosphere, and that
Again,
would be easier in better weather.
It's important that there's a bit of joined up thinking between all these things, and if you've got, for example, Musselburgh going to Mar, that you can actually say, okay, we'll play the ones and the twos, and we'll take 2 buses, and we'll take a decent crowd, and that's where there has to be that kind of joined up approach that we have seen in the past, but maybe not as regularly as we should have.
Yeah, well, it's a tough old shift, and in the women's leagues, in the top league, talking about growing the women's game, the results on the first weekend were pretty difficult viewing. Big wins. Week 2 was a bit closer, but there was one really close game, 1 point in it between Shrewsbury and Geary, but that's tough. But the energy and enthusiasm for the teams, when you see the women's clubs on social media, so much positivity flying around there. It's magic to see.
100%, and that's where you see the growth of the game at that level. The number of players that are now turning up at Hillhead, Corstorphine, Watsonians, and actually pulling their boots on for the first time and saying, do you know what, I'm going to give this a go. I saw a post, it was a while back now, right enough, but Greenock, I think, had 3 women's teams out on one weekend. Musselburgh have had a women's team entered into the Aspiring League for the first time, having only set up last year.
I knew you were going to get your mate's team in there. I knew you were going to give him a plug.
And Simon, his big brother, will kill me now.
I knew you were going to give him a plug. Big handsome facts. No, listen. I hope it gets better. I hope it gets closer. You're never going to know unless you play these games, and we've all taken a hiding, and some have been lucky to give a couple as well. But it can lose its enthusiasm. You can lose your desire pretty quickly. So I hope that gap gets bridged. But there's so many folk working hard to make those things happen, and there's a few clubs going through tough times. So hopefully there's some good stuff coming. Glasgow have got a game this weekend.
Connacht at Scotstoun on Saturday evening, 6:00 kickoff. So yeah, once we're wrapped up at the Hive, it'll be home for a quick kip, and then back on the road Saturday evening through to Glasgow.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be there, big fella. But you can fill me in. You can fill me in on how that goes. I'm really looking forward to Scotland against Wales on Friday night. I think it's going to be class. I think the chance of showcasing the game, decent weather at the Hive, atmosphere. I've no doubt the players are going to take 3.5 weeks to get off the pitch at the end, because there'll be so many folk, want to see them on the way doing the tunnel back in. But they love it and they do it very well. I'll be there.
Taking plenty of selfies.
I'll be there. I'll pretend it's Katie that wants them, but
I think everybody by this point, Bruce. I think the the jig is up in that respect. I think we all know you are the man for the pictures.
Yeah, sometimes I feel bad about being a 45-year-old, bald guy elbowing Burns out the way to get photos taken with Chloe Rowley and Rachel Malcolm. But then I think, that
doesn't last long.
I've put a lot of effort in. Who do you think you are, wee man? You can join the queue. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be class, and I hope it goes well for Burnley. Brian Eason's put a lot into that group, and it's class. And Fraser Brown, you spoke about him a wee while ago. I know how motivated he is. It'll be interesting to see his impact on that forward pack with Wales, being pretty physical. It'll be good to see what happens at breakdown. That back line, can they get unleashed? There's a great chance, and you'll have fun writing about it, big man.
Yeah, I think it should be a great game. I think, just very briefly to touch on the Glasgow game as well, I think I expect more of their first team players, not necessarily their Scotland internationals, but the guys who sit between the academy guys and our regular first team players to come back. And I think, again, if you get a night like we've got tonight, get Glasgow on that Scotstoun pitch, get a decent crowd in, and everybody accepts pre-season, you're going to give it a go. Glasgow throw it about. The best of times, we're set for a couple of really interesting games this weekend before all the serious stuff starts.
Happy days. Love it, big fella. 12 quid for 12 months. That's a bargain. That's an absolute bargain. Get involved. Great to see you, my friend. I'll catch you soon.
Great to speak to you, Bruce. I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, Scotland Rugby News from me, your host, Bruce Aitchison, Happiness Egg Shape, signing off. And he's Gav Harper, the man at the top from Scotland Rugby News. We'll see you all again next week. Have a great weekend.